The sky hasn't reflected anything human in a long time. Once it mirrored oceans, cities, and the glow of a world that believed it could last forever. Now it is a dull, metallic haze, too heavy to carry color, too toxic to hold clouds. It presses down on the earth like a lid over a dying fire. Day and night feel almost the same, except for the temperature swings, blistering heat that cracks the soil during the hours when the dim sun burns through, followed by nights so cold they feel like punishment for still breathing. The land itself no longer remembers its shape. Rivers are skeletal, their beds ribbed and splintered like the insides of some dead beast. Lakes exist only as rumors told by those who have walked too far and seen mirages they were too desperate to dismiss. Forests those that haven't burned stand like blackened fingers clawing at the sky, their trunks hollowed by heat and time. Even grass, that stubborn survivor of every age, has turned brittle and gray, snapping underfoot like old bones. The places we used to name cities, highways, borders are almost jokes now. I've passed through what used to be St. Louis, though nothing marks it but a leaning arch of corroded steel surrounded by sand. It doesn't even look like a city's remains anymore. It looks like something that never should have existed here at all. Buildings have collapsed into their own shadows, and their windows where people once stood to watch sunsets or rainstorms are jagged mouths staring out at nothing. The wind moves through them, carrying dust and scraps of paper that mean nothing to anyone now. What's left of civilization exists in fragments. There's no government, no laws that anyone follows except those enforced by desperation. Radio signals, if you catch them, are usually scavenger groups broadcasting traps disguised as help. A voice offering food or water usually means a raid waiting to happen. The larger factions roam in convoys of armored trucks, taking whatever they can find. They have their own rules, their own brands burned into their faces or their clothes. If you're not one of them, you're prey. There are still pockets of people trying to live without violence. You can hear them sometimes on the shortwave bands, their voices softer, careful. They speak in code, rarely giving away locations, because even kindness can get you killed. I've never stayed with any group for long. Every settlement I've come across eventually collapses, run out of water, burned by raiders, or consumed from the inside by arguments that turn into gunfire. No institutions remain. Schools are dust. Hospitals are shells stripped for metal. The only places that still feel like they belong to the old world are the weathered billboards, half buried along the highways, smiling faces advertising vacations, soda, a future that doesn't exist anymore. They look like ghosts trying to sell happiness to a planet that's forgotten what that feels like. Even the air feels hostile now. It's heavy, always full of particulates that sting your lungs if you're not careful. As water at night, when the wind picks up, you can hear grains of sand striking against any metal left standing, a dry static that never stops. The world hums with its own slow destruction, and we've become small inside. It's smaller than we ever believed we could be. Every step feels temporary. The ground doesn't promise stability. The horizon doesn't promise safety, and the sky doesn't promise rain. Survival is just momentum now, a decision you make 1 hour at a time because planning further feels like lying to yourself. I keep saying my name is Marisol Al-Farouki, but I'm not sure it matters anymore. shake my hand through the crackle and hiss of the radio. I'm just a voice, now one more breath in the silence. Before the world went gray, I was a meteorologist for a coastal news station. I studied patterns and predicted storms. I watched clouds swirl in graceful arcs across the sky. Now my forecasts are about radioactive rain, dust storms that peel your lungs like sandpaper, and heat waves that liquefy asphalt dot every morning eye. Still count time in mornings and nights, even though both feel endless. Pedal the generator that powers this old transmitter. My legs burn and my calves ache, but it's a small price to keep the signal alive. The hum of the dynamo beneath me is comforting. It's proof that I'm still here, still trying. When the freighter convoys pass through, I'd sell them readings, wind direction, incoming storms, water table reports in exchange for a liter of diesel or a handful of solar cells. Now the convoys have died out. Fuel is myth. I broken solar panels and rewire circuits, turning e-waste into power whenever I can. I remember the first night I lost everything. It was 5 years ago in what used to be Houston. The storm came without warning, radioactive lightning that lit the sky in violet arcs, acid rain that shattered windows and melted metal. My husband, Omar, and our daughter Layla were outside. When it hit, I watched them from my doorway, praying the storm would pass them by. It didn't. I found them 2 days later on the highway, curled together under an overturned car, faces peaceful but gone. That image is on replay in my nightmares. Some people say I should have kept broadcasting then, that the world needed my voice more than anything. But how do you speak to ghosts? I stayed silent for months, living off canned goods I'd hidden in the crawl space, and letters I wrote to Layla that I never sent. Then one evening, the wind picked up, and I heard static on the old shortwave band. A weary voice, no name, no origin, was reading coordinates, safe house instructions, water finder tips. They were weak, but they were alive. I tuned in again the next night, and the night after that. To survive somehow that pulled me out of the dark. That's when I decided to speak again. I dusted off the microphone, patched in the generator, and sent out my first broadcast. This is Marisol. If you can hear me, you aren't alone. I don't know how many heard it, maybe none, but I kept going. My broadcast schedule is unpredictable. Raids, equipment failures, and my own exhaustion force me to skip days. But I aim for at least 2 hours of live transmission every sunrise and sunset. I describe what I see. Dawn breaks over a city swallowed by rust. I can taste the ash on my tongue. Temperature at my location, 118 degrees Fahrenheit and rising. Then I relay survival tips. How to rig a charcoal filter for drinking water. Where to find edible cacti in the wasteland. How to jury-rig a rain harvest gutter out of salvaged tarpaulin. V learned the hard way that people survive on facts more than hope. But I try to weave hope in any way. After every tip, I read a fragment of something old, a love poem, a nursery rhyme, a line from a religious text, anything familiar enough to remind us that memory can outlast ruin. A single stanza of "Do not go gentle into that good night" can keep someone from turning that generator off. My hands bear the stories of my days. The knuckles are scarred from tightening bolts on corroded pipes. My fingers are stained from soldering circuits under flickering lead lamps. My nails are perpetually chipped from digging out broken cables and stripping insulation. I wash up when I can, usually in barrels of collected rainwater, but often I go days smelling like dust and rust and old coffee grounds. Still, I keep a small photo of Omar and Layla taped to the back of my control panel. I never look at it for long. It's too easy to fall apart, but it's there, so I remember where I came from and why I refuse to give up. Nightfall is the hardest. When the sun disappears, temperatures plunge, and the desert sky glows with phosphorescent storms in the distance, like distant, cosmic fireworks that could kill you if you get too close. I stay inside the broadcast shack, listening to the walls creak as they cool. I speak softly. If you're out there, wherever you are, know that I'm thinking of you. Keep breathing, keep moving. Sometimes I hear a response, a voice on another station, a hammer on metal, footsteps crunching on broken glass. Other times, it's just silence. But I refuse to let silence win. I thought once that I would be free if I could just find a community. But I've seen too many settlements crumble, poisoned wells, internal betrayals, raids that left nothing but charred tents and shattered radios. I've tried joining groups. I spent 6 weeks with the Red Dust Collective, trading weather, data for canned beans. They were kind at first, until resources ran low, and they turned on each other. I spent 3 months with the Horizon Seekers, a caravan that chased rumors of a functioning desalination plant on the Gulf Coast. We found nothing but bodies. I learned that even well-meaning people can become monsters when they're starving and terrified. So I wander alone now, broadcasting from wherever I can scavenge spare parts. An abandoned radio tower on the outskirts of Phoenix, a sunken university lab in New Orleans, a half-collapsed weather station in the Rockies. I have no fixed home-only coordinates and a commitment to keep this signal alive. What drives me? I can hear the incoming storm before I see Italo, rolling thunder that rattles the foundation of my makeshift shack and carries the bitter scent of dust and ozone. Even through the scrim of dust on my small window, I spot the horizon bending. Beneath a wall of swirling grit and searing heat. This isn't rain. It's a burning tempest of particulate-laden air that will shred lungs, poison water, and bury everything in its path. For the past 8 months, the United States has endured the Great Scorch. The jet stream collapsed, rerouting the polar vortex away from the continental interior and trapping a blistering dome of high pressure over half the country. Temperatures in Phoenix peaked above 130 degrees Fahrenheit, 54 degrees Celsius, baking water reservoirs until they vaporized, turning once thriving riverbeds to powder. By the time the convoys carrying relief supplies crawled across the desert, the wells had run dry and the missions were already too late. Right now, I'm broadcasting from what's left of a defunct air traffic control tower on the outskirts of Tucson. When I arrived, its concrete spiderweb skeleton was already half submerged in sand. I scavenged boards and storm windows to seal the openings, then ran power lines to a rusted fuel tank I'd repurposed as a rainwater collector. Though rain is so rare that I've only filled it twice in 6 months. Tonight, I'll talk about the mechanics of the scorch, how a shift in atmospheric pressure can lock heat in place, how drought begets dust, and how dust seeds itself into acid-laden clouds. I'll read out data from the last functioning NOAA buoy, I found in Lake Meadits, sensors fried, but the memory card intact. Yearly rainfall down 86% since 2021. Average summer peak temperature up 7.4 degrees Fahrenheit per decade. Lake Mead water level 22% of capacity. I'll tell people what I've learned in the ruins, that the sky is no longer forgiving, that a single storm like this can kill more people than a war in its first 48 hours. As the wind picks up outside, I tighten the last bolt on the antenna mast. My knuckles crack against corroded steel, but it holds. When the storm strikes, I'll lose power, perhaps for days. My broadcast will sputter, then go silent. But while I have juice, I'll speak. This is Marisol, Tucson Tower. Incoming storm. Front at 11:17 p.m. Local time, velocity 45 miles per hour. Particulate density lethal to unfiltered lungs. Secure all water stores. Do not expose skin. If you have charcoal or sand filters, replace them now. Expect water contamination for at least 5 days after the event. I practiced the lines once, though I've recited them a dozen times before. Each time, I wonder who's out there, someone in a rusted-out RV on Interstate 10, a child crouched in an irrigation canal tunnel, an old couple in a solar-powered dome in the nearby desert listening, copying coordinates, hoping my warning arrives early enough. 4 weeks ago, I crossed paths with Jonah and Sylvie, a pair of scavengers who call themselves the Dust Wolves. They're ruthless but efficient. He's missing 3 fingers on his right hand from a sandblast accident, and she's almost blind in one eye from a stray ember in a firestorm. They found an ozone scrubber in Flagstaff equipment left behind by the National Forest Service, its filters long expired. I traded them my last 5 solar cells and a half week's worth of dried mushrooms for the unit. It hardly functions, but it clears about 30% of the fine particulates from a small room. It could save my lungs over the next few days. Radio. Lady Jonah said, his voice crackling over my mic when he first haggled the trade. You scare people half to death with your weather reports. Why not just keep nice thoughts? Sell hope. I told him hope is as scarce as rain. He gave me a crooked grin. Then you're a merchant of death. I almost silenced him right then. But Sylvie put a hand on his arm. Listen, she said. She's right. Better to know what's coming than die unawares. They left before dawn, taking the ozone scrubber with them, so I couldn't load away all its weight. I promised them more readings if they returned. Neither did. I've learned to keep my faith in survival small, just big enough not to smother me. The scorch isn't the only disaster. From the Gulf Coast to the Pacific, toxic storms brew in the gulfweed-choked waters of newly reconnected wetlands. Hurricanes now spawn in December, drawing power from lingering Gulf heat and sweep ashore in Florida with walls of black rain that freeze metal on contact. The pressurized front rolls inland, where communities braced for drought suddenly face flash floods, carrying chemical runoff from defunct oil wells. Survivors in New Orleans reported pH levels so low that concrete dissolved. A handful of raids on the Superdome resembled ancient siege warfare. Once the water breached the barriers, nothing inside was safe. And then there are the wildfires, firestorms, as the media once called them before media died. Lightning strikes ignite parched forests, with no understory moisture to slow them. Fires leap riverbeds and torch whole towns. Evacuation routes are clogged with desperate drivers, engines overheating in the furnace air. Smoke plumes reach the stratosphere, circling the globe and plunging northern Europe into months of twilight. In London, they installed new lamps just so people could see their streets. No one who made the electricity lived to flip the switches. Here in the Southwest, we brace for whatever comes first, heat or flame. Yesterday afternoon, I watched a bank of red clouds drift across the mountain's firestorm aloft, branches and embers raining down 3 miles from the blaze. I lost 2 rainwater tanks, 2 embers that lodged in plastic lids and simmered until they burst. The next thing I thought was, what am I going to drink? And when that empty gravity tank popped like a water balloon in empty air, I understood that. Survival was fracturing into moments. Find water, breathe air, fend off fire, cling to someone, broadcast warnings, repeat. Sometimes I fantasize about a big fix, atmospheric mirrors to reflect the sun, cloud seeding drones to coax rain genetically, engineered mosses to suck carbon from the air. Scientists wrote papers in 2022 arguing that a coordinated solar radiation management program could lower global temperature by a -2 degrees Celsius within 2 years. But the proposals were shelved when politics collapsed before COVID, before the megastorms, before the copper pipeline riots in Sacramento and the mutinies in Canadian firefighting battalions. All those months spent debating ethics and governance died in the rubble of a world that forgot how to govern. So I become the scientist I never trained to be, sampling rainwater with a syringe and dribbling it onto litmus strips, comparing pH, levels, dissolved oxygen content, and turbidity. I rig a makeshift anemometer from old bicycle wheels and copper wire to track wind speed. I monitor humidity with a handful of salvaged capacitors and a scrap of nylon soaked in glycerin solution. I record everything, then broadcast the readings in metric and imperial, because you never know who's listening or which units they still remember. Tonight's forecast will include wind velocity, 45 miles per hour gusts, sustained at 27 miles per hour, enough to drive sand through clothing. Particulate concentration, 350 micrograms, PMAG, equivalent lethal after 10 minutes of unfiltered exposure. Surface temperature, 122 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 degrees Celsius at 9 p.m. thermal. Inertia will keep it above 110 degrees Fahrenheit until sunrise. Rain probability, 0.02 percentile models agree it won't arrive. I explain it slowly, clinically, because people remember facts better than fear. Then, after the data dump, I speak in softer tones. If you're in or near Tucson, move underground. If you can, culverts, irrigation tunnels, abandoned mines. Seal with plastic wrap and duct tape, not cloth. The finer particles will slip through. Check your filters. Blow them out with compressed air, or replace with layers of cotton and charcoal. If you have rain barrels, cover them. If you don't, leave clean fabric stretched under a tarp overnight to wick dew. Heat is as dangerous as the storm. Hydrate before sunset, not after. Freeze anything you can. Water bottles, wrapped damp towels, anything you can place against your neck. I pause, knowing some will scoff, some will listen, and some will try, and any one of those actions could save a life. but resources dwindle. My last supply run to Phoenix netted to half-empty propane tanks and a stack of Mr. E's mostly pistachio and coffee flavor. They're heavy and getting heavier every time I carry them home. Fuel is so scarce, I'm considering gutting the propane to power a small stove, then using the steel canisters as weights to anchor my antenna. All of this intensifies the tension. Science tells me the next 2 weeks will crown the scorch's peak. Then autumn might bring the first cold surge since 2023, cold enough to freeze pipes overnight, shatter equipment, and kill the weak. The survivors I've met fall into 3 categories. Those too hopeful to leave their camps, those too skilled to stay, and those too desperate to move alone. I drop coordinates and warnings. Some respond. Some don't last week. This is why I broadcast, why I pedal until my thighs scream, why I scavenge parts in abandoned laboratories. The crisis grows worse every dawn. Storms intensify. Furnaces of air bake the land. Raiders grow bolder, and my own supplies teeter on exhaustion. But each warning, each saved life, is a flicker in the darkness. It isn't enough to stop the storm. It isn't enough to fill the cistern. It isn't enough to rebuild a world. But it's enough to remind us that knowledge is power, that preparation can outlast panic, and that even in the most unforgiving heat, a single voice can be the spark someone needs to keep breathing. And so tonight, despite the roaring wind and the choke of dust at my throat, I will speak again. I wake before dawn, gasping as the temperature briefly dips below 105 degrees Fahrenheit, a cruel mercy. My hands fumble for the thermocouple, and I watch the numbers dance upward as the desert sun inches over the horizon. Fuel for the generator is almost gone. 1 small canister of propane left, 3 pounds of charcoal, and a half-empty jerry. Can of diesel scavenged from a burned-out semi. Food is worth 7 ration bars, 2 packets of powdered eggs, and a handful of ground mushroom capsules I harvested weeks ago. Water is proving the deadliest shortage of all. 20 liters in 5 sealed bottles, each siphoned from a melted cistern 2 weeks ago. I record the numbers in my log before switching on the mic. Every digit matters. When I broadcast these figures, they're not just statistics, they're lifelines, signals to other survivors that they're not misremembering reality, that the world is indeed still that unforgiving. My voice cracks as I read current water stores, 20L, fuel reserves, 3L diesel, 2 kilograms charcoal, 1 canister propane, food, 7-calorie bars, 2 egg packets, mushroom supplement. I pause, the static crackling like distant gunfire. If you're listening, ration tightly, boil only what you must. Filter rainwater twice, then let it stand in sunlight on a white surface for 30 minutes to kill bacteria. I've begun to dread these readings. They're a countdown to my own undoing. Each week, the numbers shrink. Each broadcast carries them closer to 0. The scorch continues its slow siege, and I'm running out of ways to delay its victory. 3 days ago, I spotted them on the horizon, a convoy of souped-up dune buggies with reinforced grills and painted skulls. Raiders, by the afternoon stench of sweat and burnt rubber. They straddled the ridge in silhouette, scanning for targets. I ducked behind the tower's metal ribs, heart hammering against my ribs like a dying drum. I watched them fan out, sending 2 smaller teams to the east and west. Their leader stayed back, peering through binoculars at my antenna. I knew what they wanted, that thin beam of hope beaming out into the wasteland. Control the radio network, control the rumors, control the remnants of humanity. I flicked off the generator, plunging the shack into darkness. My broadcast went silent. My only company was the wind whistling through the broken louvers. I waited, counting breaths. In the distance, I heard engines die, footsteps crush gravel, a crow cawing. Then a voice, low and amused. "Radio lady, we know you're in there. Come out with your hands empty." I could have surrendered. There was nothing left to barricade with. But giving in meant handing them every scrap of intelligence I'd gathered, every map, annotation, every survival tip that might save someone else. So I stayed silent. I listened as they kicked the door open, as one of them stooped to examine my meager stores. I heard metal cans clatter, felt the floor shake beneath heavy boots. I caught sight of him through the doorway, lean tattooed arms, smeared with grease and ash, eyes glittering with the promise of violence. He reached for my radio board, yanking wires until sparks flew. I closed my eyes and prayed the solar panels on the roof would hold out until they left. I felt foolish, begging to a god that didn't exist. Then the shack erupted with a roar, not my generator, but something else. The raiders scattered as a dust devil slammed into the clearing, a swirling funnel of sand and scrap metal. It barreled through, tossing vehicles like toys and drenching the dry earth with fury. When it passed, all that remained were skid marks and bits of shredded cloth. They retreated as quickly as they'd come. I scrambled out, relit the generator, and found the door mangled. My last radio board half melted, but the panels survived. I replaced the wires, mended connections with melted solder, and broadcast immediately. Raiders attempted a takeover 2 hours ago. All clear for now, but move underground if you can. My voice was hoarse, but I refused to let the silence linger. I patched in my encounter as a lesson. Never broadcast location coordinates unless you've masked them in code. Raiders use decoys, fake transmissions that lure you out. Always maintain an alternate safe house. I'll post the coordinates tomorrow in cipher. Meanwhile, remember, the storm front is still 2 days out, moving north at 30 miles per hour. I watched the transcript on my cracked screen and hoped someone decoded it, and then the rumor started pulsing through the network. A water vault hidden beneath an abandoned military base 30 miles north, east of the Painted Desert. It was. First mentioned as a joke on an outlaw feed someone testing their new transmitter. But 3 days later, the sentence appeared again on a survivor subgroup, vault intact. Rainwater still stored, coordinates available if you can find my channel. Some said it was a lie, a raider trap. Others called it the myth of Painted Oasis. The more I heard it, the more I felt a flicker of that old, dangerous feeling. Hope, my pragmatic mind recoiled. There is no oasis. Everything we built rots. But my human heart had other ideas. If that vault existed, even a fraction of its water remained, it could sustain dozens, maybe hundreds. It could shift the balance, give survivors a base to rebuild around. I could broadcast the rumor, invite panic and pilferage, or I could investigate discreetly, then decide whether to share. I weigh these choices as evening settles. The wind dies down, The stars emerge, pale reminder of a sky that once guided travelers. I pack minimal gear, 2 water bottles, a compass, scavenged from a dead soldier's belt, a ration bar, the repaired ozone scrubber. I slip out of the shack, leaving the generator humming to maintain the broadcast loop. Pre-recorded warnings on storm velocity, radar signals, filtration tips. If I don't return, at least someone will know where to find help. The first night of the journey is mercifully cool, but the path winds through ridges of sand, so fine it feels like walking through flour. Every step kicks up plumes that force me to stop and dan my mask. My water sweater on, old cotton shirt dampened to cool my neck dries in an hour under the pale moon. I ration each sip, thinking how every drop is worth more than gold. By the second day, the desert shows its teeth. On a plateau, the sun turns rock to mirrors that glare white enough to blind the eye. Stumble into the hollow of a collapsed bunker-lined tunnels carved by centuries of erosion. Inside, I find a can of peaches with the label soaked off, half a loaf, of mildewed bread, and a journal bound in cracked leather. It's the diary of a lieutenant stationed here in 2028, scribbled pages about morale, supply shortages, and a final note. If anyone finds this, know that the water vault is real. Coordinates 35N110W. Trust no one. My heart hammers so hard I struggle to read the faded ink. The coordinates match the rumor's general area. I copy them onto a scrap of paper and tuck it into my pocket. My rational mind tries to dismiss the lieutenant's words. Maybe he was as desperate as we are. But the voice inside me, a voice, I thought, dead whispers. This is real. You might save them. In the distance, I see movement. Another figure, hunched under scavenged armor, limping toward me. My hand hovers over my makeshift spiral length of rebar sharpened at one end. I call out, I'm alone. I mean no harm. The figure freezes, then lowers its head, revealing a woman's face streaked with sweat and grime. Her mask hangs by one strap. She's gasping for breath. She croaks. Water and shelter. Her voice cracks. I search her eyes. Fear, exhaustion, but not malice. She collapses at my feet. I lift her into the bunker and strip off my last ration bar and half a bottle of water. As she drinks, I check her for weapons. Nothing but a small knife at her belt. In her pack, I find a worn radio, its tuning knob cracked, but the speaker intact. She introduces herself as Faiza. She heard my broadcasts some nights back. When her own transmission failed, she came looking for water, for companionship, for any sign that she wasn't the only one left. I study her, the faint tremor in her arms, the way her eyes dart. She's obviously asleep now. I lean against the bunker wall and wonder, do I trust her? Trust is a currency more precious than water. Betray it, and you risk life itself. Take it for granted, and you risk betrayal. We're both survivors, both desperate. Perhaps together we can find this vault. Perhaps we'll tear each other apart. That's when the internal war begins. Duty versus caution, hope versus responsibility. I could stay silent, keep the secret to myself, and maybe use the water to build a true sanctuary. But secrecy in this world is fragile. Knowledge always seeps out. And if I lead others there, I could trigger a massacre. Night drips into my bones as I wrestle with the decision. I catch Faiza's ragged breathing, see her lips stained with my water. She's alive because I helped her. Maybe that's the answer. Survival isn't a solitary path. It's a choice to share, to risk betrayal for the chance of unity. I exhale a shallow breath and reach for the radio microphone. My voice trembles as I speak. This is Marisol Al-Faruqi. I have critical coordinates to share on the survivor. Network 35N 110W. A military vault holds untreated rainwater, estimated at 5,000 L. Proceed with caution. Raiders may flank the road. Move quietly. Distribute rations fairly. My finger hovers above the transmit button. The hammering in my chest sounds like a war drum. I wonder if I'm condemning everyone to a bloodbath or giving them a chance to start anew. I'm no longer just a voice in the static. I've become a decision-maker, one whose choice could alter the fate of countless lives. I've pressed the button, static. Then my words echo across frequencies I'll never hear. Silence returns. The rising action has arrived. The desert hums with impending movement. The myth of painted oasis turns into a real destination. And the choice I made sets events in motion. Trust has been cast like a stone. And now I must prepare for the ripples. I wake to the distant rumble of engines and the low murmur of radios. Hundreds of voices converging on a single set of coordinates. Before me, the painted desert stretches, in pale waves, sun-bleached and lethal. In the bunker's dim light, Faiza stirs beside me, her eyes wide with worry. They're coming, she whispers. I nod, throat tight. There's no turning back now. We slip from the bunker as first light fractures the horizon. The convoy snakes along a washboard road, battered pickups with reinforced bumpers, dune buggies with improvised armor, and rusting hatchbacks piled high with jerry cans. Soldier silhouettes crouch in beds of trucks, rifles cradled at ready. Some call themselves survivors, others freedom fighters, but they carry the same glare in their eyes, desperation. At the head of the line, I spot the dust wolf's Jonah's missing finger hand resting casually on his rifle stock, Sylvie's single good eye scanning the landscape. They push through the crowd as if they own the place. Raiders have arrived to claim the vault for themselves. I raise my hand, voice trembling over the radio. All units, stand down. This vault is a communal resource. We share, ration, rebuild. A rifle blast cuts me off. The first shot rings out from a rooftop of sandstone slabs towering remnants of an old guard tower at the site's edge. Splinters of rock scatter at Jonah's feet. Faiza, I shout, sprinting after him. The convoy surges forward, headlights swinging across the dunes like vultures circling a carcass. I crash through waist-high drifts, heart pounding so fiercely I can taste blood in my mouth. Faiza stumbles, half blinded by panic. I catch her arm and pull her upright. Stay close, I hiss. In the center of the clearing stands the vault's entrance, a reinforced steel door half covered in sand, its combination wheel frozen by rust. 6 months ago, the lieutenant's journal described turning the wheel 3 full rotations, then pulling at precisely 40 degrees of resistance. I kneel, fingertips tracing the corroded dial. Memories of his cramped handwriting swim before my eyes. I begin the turns, 1, 2, 3, then the pause. I pull, white-knuckled, the lock grinds, and with an agonizing sigh of metal on metal, the door swings inward. A cheer rises from the crowd. until a haze of dust erupts from inside. A sudden cyclone of particles erupts from the vault chamber, triggered by the pressure difference. The bunker roof above buckles. Jonah dives into the swirling cloud, rifle held aloft. I follow Feza at my side, gasping through damp cloths pressed to our faces. Inside, water drums against the steel walls, 8 massive tanks gleaming murky blue under my torch's beam. Tears sting my eyes. My voice breaks in ecstasy. We did it. It's here. But there's no time for celebration. Through the dust, I hear screams, people clawing at empty air, coughing until they choke. Sylvie materializes at the doorway, coughing, torch in one hand, fist raised in defiance. It's feeding a storm, she shouts. The pressure change triggered a release of fine droplets acidic residue from decades of leaching chemicals in the concrete. This water, it's toxic. I stagger back, horror ripping through me. The lieutenant's journal didn't mention toxicity. He only noted untreated rainwater. I scan the tank's rims, streaks of rust and yellowish stains. I taste a bead of condensation on my glove-sharp metallic, burning my tongue. We'd traded hope for poison. Chaos erupts. Raiders fire into the chamber, bullets pinging off steel. Survivors scramble for makeshift gas masks. I grab the valve wheel and wrench it shut, praying the seal holds. Everyone out. Now I scream. But in the crush, Jonah is struck in the shoulder, crumpling against the tanks. Feza yanks him. To his feet, blood soaking through his shirt. We fight our way outside, the world a maelstrom of dust and chemical mist. My lungs seize with each breath. I latch onto Jonah's belt, dragging him to the bunker's remains. Sylvie hammers a scrap of metal across the entrance, cutting off the worst of the storm. Feza presses her bandana to Jonah's wound, pale and shaking. Around us, the crowd snarls, some pounding the door, others collapsing in convulsive coughs. I sweep my torch across their faces. Fear, betrayal, rage. The vault tower promised salvation has become a death trap. Above, the sky darkens to a bruised purple. The wind roars as if enraged. I realize the storm isn't just here, it's coming. A supercell born from the toxic vapor, a toxic rain front that will churn across the desert, poisoning every drop of water, every blade of grass it touches. If it reaches the bunker, it will bury us all. My mind races. Lives hang in the balance. Jonah's life, Feza's, Sylvie's, dozens more. The raiders will use the chaos to seize control. The survivors will stampede into the storm, desperate, for water only to find themselves drinking poison. I have one choice: live broadcast, warn everyone, and lure them underground into makeshift shelters we can seal tight. But that means revealing my vocation, sacrificing the secrecy I carefully maintained, or stay silent, slip away with the wounded, and hope they follow us. My hand hovers over the mic. I recall Omar's soft laugh and Layla's gentle grip on my finger, the life I lost because I hesitated once before. I can't stand by again. I flip the switch. My voice slices through the noise. This is the water vault is contaminated. Do not touch it. Seek refuge immediately in any subterranean structure, culverts, mine shafts, fallout shelters. Seal your entrances. I'll remain here to guide you. Follow my signal on 7.29 megahertz. Do not venture out until the storm passes in 72 hours. Silence follows, broken only by static. Then a crackle as one by one radios flicker back to life with replies. Copy that. On our way. Thank you. The crowd pauses, caught between greed and fear. They run for cover, obeying. The voice that once offered hope. Lightning flares across the sky, a jagged scar that sets the world ablaze for an instant. The storm front hits with apocalyptic intensity, a curtain of black rain, acid dripping through the air like malevolent. Tears. I yank Feza and Jonah toward a rusted storm drain I spotted on the approach. The noise is unendurable, wind screaming, metal creaking, the world tearing open. Inside the drain, we crouch, hearts pounding. Water sloshes overhead, a cold chemical assault that hisses against the concrete. Feza wraps a tarpaulin over the grate. Sylvie slams a steel plate against it. We press towels against cracks as the storm batters us. My chest aches, and I realize I haven't breathed properly in seconds. I risk a glance back. Survivors, some armed, some not, crawling through adjacent tunnels, pulling others along. They're alive, guided by the broadcast they trusted. Jonah groans beside me, sweat glistening on his feverish brow. I press his hand. You saved them, I whisper. You kept them alive. His eyes flutter open. We did it. For a moment, the tunnel is still, but for the drip of acid rain outside. I close my eyes. Trust, I think, is more precious than water, more vital than oxygen. Hope may kill as easily as it saves, but without it, we're already dead. The storm rages for hours. We huddle close, sharing the last of our bottled water, monitoring Jonah's pulse, keeping watch for structural collapse. Jonah stands at the edge of the clearing, rifle laid aside. He looks at me, voice rough but proud. You did it. You saved us. I shake my head. We did it. I correct. Together. Above. The sun burns slowly through a sky that's begun. Too clear. The wall of darkness has lifted. Around us, people clamp steel plates over culvert entrances, rig makeshift filters, patch wounds. They don't wait for orders. They act, united by a single voice. My generator lies cracked in the sand, but I don't mind. I have words to share, maps to draw, communities to connect. The world is still broken, farther gone than any of us dared admit, but for the first time in years, I believe we might build something from the ruins, because sometimes the turning point isn't a discovery or a weapon, it's a choice to risk everything for the chance that humanity can rise again. And in that choice, we find our salvation. I emerge from the culvert into a world transformed by fire and acid rain. The vault door is buried nearly to its hinge in windblown sand, its promise of salvation sealed beneath layers of debris. Survivors mill about the clearing, voices low with exhaustion and relief. Some kneel to sift handfuls of sand through cloth bags, searching for stray droplets of hope. Others share water from communal jerry cans, their hands trembling as they pass bottles from one pair of cracked lips to the next. When I step into the open air, someone hands me a half-filled canteen. The water inside is clouded with dust, faint taste of metal, but I drink anyway, letting it sluice past scarred teeth and down a parched throat. I raise the canteen in silent salute. Around me, heads bow in unison. We commemorate our survival with a simple gesture, a shared ritual that costs nothing but signifies everything. Jonah stands nearby, binding a makeshift tourniquet around his mangled shoulder. Sylvie has fashioned a sling from her torn shirt, and Faiza kneels beside a group of children, teaching them to test water with litmus strips she salvaged from an old lab kit. Each child holds a piece of white paper stained with the telltale pink of acid. They press their lips in concentration before tucking the strips into the pockets of their beaten jackets. I watch them and feel an unfamiliar stirring in my chest, cautious optimism. We averted disaster, guided by a warning that risked exposing us all. And even though the vault's water was contaminated, our quick decision to shelter underground saved dozens of lives. The raiders, thwarted by the storm and our broadcast, melted back into the desert on their dune buggies, leaving only tire tracks and broken promises behind. I crouch beside Jonah and press my palm to his shoulder. His breath is ragged but steady. "You'll live," I tell him. He gives a tired nod, eyes locking on mine with the clarity of a man who has waded through death's tide and come back. Beside us, survivors set up support posts, tarps draped over metal rods scavenged from the vault's framework serve as rudimentary tents. Barrels of filtered rainwater, drawn from previously hidden torrents, gleam under the sun like buried treasure. Despite the small victories, the environment offers no forgiveness. The desert winds whip dust across the dunes in shimmering waves, each grain a reminder that the earth remains hostile. The sky, once bruised and toxic, shows pale promises of blue through thinning clouds of ash, but storms still brew beyond the horizon. In the distance, I can see low clouds rolling off the mountains, a reminder that the scorch's next phase could be a sudden heat dome or another torrent of acid rain. I walk to the edge of the clearing and gaze at the battered horizon. Where the vault door once promised abundance, now there's only silence and the slow creep of sand. A single mesquite tree, its foliage burned, two brittle twigs stand sentinel over the site. I kneel by its scorched roots and run a finger along a sapling that stubbornly sprouts new green leaves. It's small, nothing more than a tender shoot, but it pulses with life. The tree survived the storm, and so might we. Back at the makeshift camp, survivors gather around a whiteboard I've erected on an old steel panel. I sketch a map of nearby water sources, rainwater cisterns I located last spring, a half-buried artesian well south of Casa Grande, and a cluster of underground aquifers to the west. Each spot is annotated with distance, expected yield, and the filtration methods needed. Around me, people lean in, eyes shining with attention and purpose. They ask questions. How deep is the well? Can I use hair charcoal for the filters? What about solar stills in the morning? I answer as best I can, drawing from every scrap of data I've recorded since the scorch began. In the back of the crowd, Faiza distributes ration tokens, small carved stones that survivors redeem for water, food, or medical supplies. She's taken on the mantle of quartermaster, her steady voice a beacon of order in the chaos. I catch her eye, and she offers a small, tired smile. We made it through the worst together, and now we're building something new. Night falls with a hard edge of cold, but around the fire pit nothing more than oil drums stacked and filled with driftwood, warm. Survivors form a loose circle. Former teachers, engineers, farmers, mechanics, displaced city dwellers. Each person brings a skill, a story, a shred of hope. The children cluster close, their eyes wide as Jonah recounts the moment the vault door turned, letting the dust devil loose. They giggle nervously at the memory of raiders diving for cover, only to be swept away by nature's fury. I sit beside Sylvie, who leans her good eye into the firelight. "You did more than save lives today," she tells me, her voice hoarse. "You reminded people how to trust, how to work together." She dips a spoon into a pot of rehydrated stew lentils, chickpeas, and scorched slabs of what used to be chicken and offers me a bowl. It's gritty and thin, but it's sustenance. As I eat, I reflect on the journey that brought me here. 5 years ago, I clung to the ruins of my past Homer's smile, Layla's laughtering, till the static of grief drowned out everything else. Then I found my voice again through the radio. At first, a whisper of survival tips, then a steady pulse of data and encouragement that bridged the lonely miles between us. I broadcast warnings, scientific explanations, snippets of poetry holding currency of hope so fragile that it could shatter with a single raid. Tonight, hope feels less like a lie. It's a shared flame. We've tasted fear and tasted poison, but we endured. The act of turning a dial, of speaking into the mic, saved more than my own life. It sparked a movement. I've learned that wisdom isn't just knowing when to speak, but knowing when to listen to the desert, to the patterns of storms, to each other. And in listening, we build trust, the most vital resource of all. The mesquite sapling still beckons me, so before sleep claims me, I return to its side and kneel. Touching the fragile leaves, I whisper a promise. I will protect this community. I will foster growth where there was only death. I will remain a voice in the static, guiding those who have no other beacon. As the wind rustles the young leaves, I swear I hear an echo of agreement. In the final haze of waking dreams, I imagine a future, water wheels turning on a shallow canal, gardens planted in reinforced greenhouses, children reading by solar lamps in the evenings. The land will take decades, centuries to heal, but perhaps we can speed it by our own hands. We can coax the earth back to life with each carefully managed drop, each shared lesson, each act of compassion. Dawn comes at last, pale and insistently. Warm, I rise from the sand, shoulders sore, but spirit lighter than I've felt in years. Survivors stir around cooking fires, and the horizon glows with the first rays of light. I set my boots into the warming soil and lift my gaze to the sky. That has begun to clear. It's not blue yet, too soon for miracles, but the haze is lifting. I switch on the small transmitter set up beside me. As the generator sputters to life, I speak into the mic. This is Marisol Al-Farouki. To all survivors in range, you are safe for now. Tomorrow, we begin rebuilding. Coordinates for tomorrow's water convoy as before. We will ration, we will share, and we will grow stronger. The scorch continues, but so do we. Stay vigilant, stay united, and most of all, stay human. My words crackle over the airwaves, carried beyond the shuttered vault, beyond the dunes, into the fringe of civilization, clinging to survival. I end with a fragment of a poem I once loved. Though my soul may set in darkness, it will rise in perfect light. As the final syllables fade, I fold into the task ahead. Each broadcast, each instruction, each shared story is a brick in the foundation we're laying. The world remains broken, battered by climate and conflict, but we have learned to stand together. In the aftermath of catastrophe, when the dust clears and the acid rains stop, we will still be here scarred, but alive, remembering our losses, honoring our dead, and daring at last to dream of a tomorrow that isn't just about surviving, but about living. Dawn breaks over the desert with a muted gentleness, as though the sun itself is unsure it deserves the honor. The horizon glows in soft apricot tones, filtered through the haze of dust still lingering from yesterday's storm. I stand at the edge of